Hello everyone. I want to take a little bit of time to talk a little bit about diversity and how diversity impacts teams. In relation to leading teams, diversity is the difference among members. Demographic, psychological, and organizational characteristics are the three defining types of diversity in and among teams. Diversity is an important aspect of leading teams in the classroom as well as in the boardroom. Understanding why this is important, the different types of diversity, and how to manage diversity are excellent starting points for teams seeking greater relations and communication. When I explain diversity, I often use the example of a tool shed. Inside the tool shed there are many screwdrivers, drills, saws, blades, and then mostly organized. Diversity is the bright, shiny tool that illuminates when someone shines a light on it. Think of diversity as a resource tool. Diversity in a group can lead to problems caused by misperceptions about others and competition among groups. The stages of team building include forming, norming, storming, performing, and evaluating. When do you think diversity is first identified in the process? And at what stage does a team embrace, accept, or ignore, or even reject diversity? What happens when diversity is not managed? The simplest answer is that groups form and behave differently. The important aspect is that diversity problems are not going to magically disappear. Teams must learn to use diversity to their advantage. Otherwise, teams will experience issues in communication, participation, and group cohesion. Demographic diversity is generally described in terms of gender or ethnicity in the workplace setting. However, diversity can be further defined and categorized in relation to how diversity itself impacts work groups. While gender and ethnicity often are the most visible or surface-level aspects of diversity, it is important to further explore diversity in terms of demographic, psychological, and organizational parameters. But first, an understanding of our own diversity is not a concept that can be placed in a mold or replication. In other words, cultures in various parts of the world may view certain aspects of diversity with greater or less importance. For example, demographic diversity in the United States accommodates the practice of an employee's religious beliefs to accomplish diversity. But in the Middle East, for example, religious practice in the workplace is nurtured and receives a high degree of acceptance. Gender, race, and ethnicity, nationality, and age also encompass the definition of demographic diversity. In fact, the United States and other countries extend constitutional protections to individuals under Title 11 of the Civil Rights Act. So if diversity can be defined in demographic terms, does it end there? No. Diversity can be further explored and defined by psychological and organizational parameters. True, as we go from surface-level exploration of diversity to a deeper level, the lines become gray instead of black and white. Psychological diversity relates to the process of thought and the behavior of people. Let's explore the process of thought, which is also referred to as cognition. Closely linked to an individual's psychological diversity is his or her personality and behavior. Is the team member aggressive or assertive, competitive or cooperative, charismatic or introverted, risk-oriented or risk-averse? Secondly, is the team member unique in what he or she brings to the group? For example, has the team member a greater knowledge of the issue at hand, a special skill to deal with the issue, or an ability that no other member possesses? Organizational diversity is defined by an individual's status within an organization. The easiest way to determine status is to review the organizational chart of the company. But while we tend to grant status and power to individuals simply because of their title, position, or department, there are other factors that should be considered, such as occupational specialty and tenure. Now that we've defined the type of diversity, let's examine how diversity affects a group in terms of how people act and how people interact. Note the clear distinction in how the call of the question was presented. How people act and how people interact. Is there a difference? The fine line of exploring how people act and interact is accomplished by understanding the trait approach. The trait approach presumes that people with different backgrounds have different values, skills, and personalities. In other words, everyone is different, and this difference represents the ingredients to diversity. The second way to view how diversity affects a group is the expectation approach. While the trait approach presumes that people of diverse backgrounds will act and interact differently, the expectation approach focuses on individual beliefs in what they think other people are like. Usually people who rely on the expectation approach are in essence construction, a social base, or a social bias based on their need to simplify and categorize diversity in an arbitrary manner. So by now, we have learned about the types of diversity in organizations, why diversity is important, and how to approach diversity. But are there problems with diversity? Is diversity a good thing? Why do people see diversity as bad? The answer to these questions begins with a perceptual exploration of ourselves and how this perception is used to accept or reject similarities or differences. In other words, what do you perceive diversity to be? How does your mind gather, sort, and separate different viewpoints, unique processes, and social experiences? Exploring perceptual biases can be accomplished by asking, do we hold on to our first impressions, or do we allow subsequent learning that may contradict first impressions to be considered? Do we simplify our understandings of a person to be either good or bad? Do we interpret good as being competent, skilled, knowledgeable? Do we view people similar to ourselves as positive? Taking the above questions in part or in whole, why then is perception cause of diversity? Isn't it human nature to want to categorize others? The problem with social perception is that it leads to prejudices, stereotyping, misperceptions, and premature judgments. The important element to understand is that human nature is an unavoidable consequence of society. Whether you are a team leader or a team member, it will be crucial for you to accept human nature, but to realize that it is often an arbitrary evaluation. In other words, be open to accepting new information as you and your team members gain group cohesion.